we're also doing this on YouTube right now, and so we have and one of our panelists is doing it. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Women's Center. This is our monthly series, Feminist Fireside Chat. Today's series is Women's Mental Health Panel. So we'll be talking about women's experience as mental health clinicians, as well as experiences of women pertaining to mental health. And this is the Women's Center. So welcome if you've never been before, and welcome back if you have. My name is Allison Kendall. I'm the graduate assistant here at the Women's Center. We are joined by Chelsea Duffert, who is managing the tech behind the camera. She is the coordinator of the Women's Center. We're also joined by Natasha Ria Elskari, who is our director of the Women's Center as well. We also have some lovely student staff here who make our events possible, and also an audience of some lovely UMKC students. We're also joined today by UMKC Counseling Services in the corner. We also have some information over there about UMKC's community counseling and assessment services. All students are allotted 8 free sessions, both at Counseling Services or UMKC Community Counseling and Assessment Services. And on the slides, you will see some information about that, as well as the clinicians' private practice services too. Okay, so before we begin, we would like to acknowledge our center sits on the traditional, ancestral, and current home of Native Americans, Indigenous, and First Nations people. I ask you to join me in acknowledging the many tribal groups from our area, including the Osage, Kaw, Kickapoo, and Sioux tribes. We honor the elders, both past and present, and this calls us to commit to continuing to learn their stories, as well as how to be better stewards of the land that we occupy. Okay. So now I would like to introduce our esteemed panel of clinicians. Jennifer, can you hear us?
I can.
So we cannot hear you, so let's I'm going to actually go ahead and introduce just to not put all the pressure on Chelsea in this moment. Okay, so we'll start with Michaela Puryear. Michaela Puryear holds her Master's of Arts in Psychology and is currently in her 4th year of the Counseling Psychology PhD program here at UMKC. She currently sees clients at KU Medical Center, in which she sees clients who face trauma, interpersonal issues, anxiety, and depression. She also served as my clinical supervisor for my first semester of practicum, so I can personally speak to her clinical and guidance skills. The next one is So the next clinician I'd like to introduce is Jennifer Kendall. Jennifer Kendall is a UMKC alum and is a licensed professional counselor in both Kansas and Missouri. Jennifer owns a private practice called Arise Counseling in Leessummit, Missouri, where she serves a wide range of clients, including teens, couples, and LGBTQIA+ folks. I consider Jennifer as my mentor, as she is the person I cite as the reason I got to the field of psychology. You may notice that we have the same last name. And then, yes.
Thank you.
Jennifer, can you speak, please?
Sure. Can you hear me?
No.
It's in my speaker.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Can you come into the
Which one would it be? Digital output? Okay, speak again.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh,
Okay, can you see us all?
I can.
Okay, fabulous. All right, and I would like to now introduce our third panelist today. This is Renee McCreary over here in the blue. She is a licensed professional counselor who has over 30 years of experience working in numerous settings, including treatment centers, private practices, and academia. Renee currently treats clients at Briarcliff Counseling Services, where she promotes an anti-oppression environment. She specializes in working with clients who experience interpersonal violence, relationship concerns, and substance abuse. Renee also has her ed specialist and served as my professor. So welcome, Renee, everybody. So we see that all of these lovely clinicians have a connection with UMPC, which I thought was lovely, and I know personally. So really excited to share some of their wisdom and expertise with you. Okay, so we'll just go ahead and get started with the questions. So first, I will start with you, Michaela. Can you introduce yourself in one sentence?
Try really hard. My name is Michaela Pertier. I was born and mostly raised here in Kansas City. I guess that's it. You said all the other
You-
stuff.
And if you want a couple more sentences, go for it.
I guess what I really want to do is work in mental health within the Black community and have tailored services for people living in the inner city Black community in Kansas City.
Okay, Renee, go ahead and do the same, please.
I wrote all my interest down so I could be concise. All right, I'm a grandmother of 6, a friend of many, a traveler, and a small business owner.
Jennifer, can you please introduce yourself in one sentence?
Hello. I'm Jennifer Kendall. I am a therapist and an owner of a private practice. I am a mother, and I'm many things I have not decided on yet. So I'm also just like an evolving human.
I think we can all relate to that for sure. So, yeah. All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here. Next question I have for you is, can you talk about what made you want to become a counselor and what mental health means to you?
So my junior year in high school, I took IB psychology, and while my professor wasn't super engaging, it wasn't a super fun class, the material, I was just super interested in it, which made me think, okay, this must be something I want to do if I'm interested in it, and I don't even like this class. And just since then, I've just been working towards that. And mental health to me means it's like sacred work of taking care of people's kind of overall well-being so they can exist in the world and have a quality of life that is meaningful for them. So, yeah.
All right. So I always knew that I wanted to be a psychologist ever since I can remember. My dad is a minister, my mom was a nurse, so our family was always engaged in caring for other people in some way. And so I picked up the baton there to care for my community and care for my community. I think of mental health on a continuum in that, we all have mental health and we all have mental health needs. And it's like, yeah, I don't really separate it from our physical health. I think of them as just really being one and the same. But as a counselor, I think about mental health needs on a continuum. So from stress management, kind of at the easy level, all the way to different levels of psychosis and where the brain's really kind of wiring's really gotten kind of crossed. So yeah, and I love that as a counselor, that I get to see people with needs across that continuum of care. So.
Thank you so much. Jennifer, can you answer as well? Can you talk about what made you want to become a counselor and what mental health means to you?
Sure. Well, I can't say that I always knew I wanted to be a counselor. That would have been far more convenient than the actual path that I took. So I did, though, as a teenager, experience a tremendous amount of emotional distress as a part of the family that I was born into. And so I grew up with a quite tumultuous environment and had no idea how to navigate that or be successful in it. And oftentimes I internalized the idea that I would not be successful, that it was not, in the cards per se, but it was mostly that I didn't have any idea how to change it. I didn't know what I was doing. It just sort of felt like I was a fish flopping around on land. And I think that ultimately drove me to want to be a counselor, to be able to learn it for myself and to feel like I had some influence in my outcomes, but also to be able to teach that and to empower other people to expand themselves and believe that they can affect change for themselves. So that is ultimately why I landed in this position. And I would probably define mental health for myself just as like the very fine balance between mind and body and its functionality, how well I understand and interpret myself, and then how I'm able to navigate my environment and influences on why I can or be successful, perhaps, things which stand in my way. So all of that, I think, culminates in like my perception of who I am. And that ultimately is probably how I would define it.
Wonderful. Thank you all for your very insightful experiences. And I think some of the counselors are ones that have their own challenges and can really relate to their clients based on those challenges. And it all seems like you all had kind of that helping gene within you to begin with. I also really love that none of you said mental health is the absence of mental diagnosis or mental disorder, if you will. It's really more that presence of resilience and really just committing yourself to wellness, both mentally and physically. So thank you so much for sharing that. The next question I have for you all is, can you speak on your educational background and career path? And anybody can go. It's kind of free.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Okay, lovely.
All right. So I did my undergrad at a historically Black college and university called Prairie View A&M. It's about 45 minutes outside of Houston, Texas. And after that, I knew I wanted to further my education, but I also knew like I'm not trying to go right into a grad school program. And my mom was like, well, maybe have you thought about Peace Corps? And I was like, no, never heard of it. So I did some research on the Peace Corps, talked to some people who went. So I spent 2 years living in a really tiny country that's landlocked by the country of South Africa called Lesotho for about 26 months.
Wow.
Came back here, worked a year in a domestic violence shelter in Kansas, and then I applied for PhD programs. That might have been my second time applying for PhD programs. I didn't get in anywhere. But Rutgers was like, we're not going to take you in a PhD program, but we have a master's program and it's fully funded, which is like never heard of. So I knew I was lacking the research experience. It was basically a research program. I was like, if they're going to pay for it and give me a stipend, I should go. And so I went, got my master's, and then applied for PhD programs when I was ending. Didn't get into any. Came back here for a year and worked, applied again. And then I got into UMKC. And it's funny because the last time I applied, I only applied to UMKC because by that time, I'm like, I'm not moving again. If God wants me to do this, this is going to work out. And here I am. So, yeah.
Thanks. All right. So I finished my bachelor's degree in psychology in 1981. And then went on, like most country girls do, to get married and then have a couple of sons, which was delightful and really kind of a part of my journey in becoming a mental health professional. So then I went back to grad school and I went to Maryville. My education is all very like rural Missouri. I went to Missouri Western undergrad and then went to Northwest up in Maryville for grad school and graduated from there with a 32-hour master's program, which they did back then. And at the time, I was eligible for a licensure as a psychologist in the state of Missouri. And I didn't complete that because the licensed professional counselor, the licensing as a professional counselor was just like right on the edge. And I was just sort of waiting for that because where I was working, I didn't have access to a psychologist to supervise me. And I loved where I was working. I was working at Synergy, by the way. Anyway, I loved where I was working. And so I decided to stay there and complete my counseling licensure. And yes, and so as I got older, my kids had graduated, blah, blah, blah. I thought there was a possibility that my oldest son and his wife would move out of state. And I thought I might end up joining them. And I knew that with a 32-hour degree, that I wasn't going to be able to get licensed probably in another state. So I went back, and I'm so glad I did. I went back and completed an education specialist degree, and it took me like 9 years. It was 32 hours or something. But I learned so much, including how to use a computer well. So yeah.
All right, Jennifer, can you also speak to your educational background and career path?
Sure. So I did some things. At like 18, I was like, oh, I'm going to go into graphic design. I like art. And then, couple credits away from completion, I was like, I'm not really good at drawing. And so I was just like, what am I doing? So then also to suit family, which was like the family pressure, I also tried a year at a religious college, and that was not successful. And so I drifted for a little bit. And I share that just because I think that's so important to normalize. Just drifting and just sort of landing is just so common. And I wish I knew that. So I would probably have internalized less confusion along the way. But somewhere along the line, when I realized, like, I think I'd like to understand myself more, and I'd like to understand this whole life thing. I went back for my associates of art just to perhaps maybe get more exposure and then hone in on it. And then I did my BA at UMKC, gave birth to a child right before my very last semester and finals. That was quite challenging. And then after that, I took a little time off just to be with her. And then I quickly pursued my master's degree at Avila for the LPC. And after that, I did my internship at Research Psychiatric Center locally in Kansas City. And in my internship, you just sort of get tossed in over there. And so I literally have done everything from adults to military to seniors and children and families and the intensive units. And so I led groups, and the exposure is priceless, but it can be really difficult. And I learned to navigate that. But of course, I didn't have much other knowledge either about what other potentials were out there. I signed on after internship for a full position there and worked as an adult unit social services clinician, where I actually bridged a lot of work between teams of psychiatrists and families, and then the adult unit as well, the adolescent unit. And so what I learned there was really so much suffering exists that just goes like unmet and untreated. And even though they're in a hospital to be treated, oftentimes it's like there's an inadequacy. And that was really wounding, to be honest with you, to feel like there's so much that we're not able to assist in. So I stepped out of that to take care of myself mentally and emotionally, and I began to just work with children. And so I was the lead therapist at the adolescent partial hospital program, responsible for developing programming and staffing interns and supervising that. I also did some of the adult work too. But it was in that role that I really learned that the one-on-one or the small group is where we can impact a tremendous amount of change. And so there I started feeling like I would put my energy, and that's where I began to focus more directly. COVID hit, and that took a turn. It was drastically affected many teenagers, and with the acuity and self-harm rate and security, I wasn't able to continue in that position. So I stepped over to Resolve Counseling and Wellness in Mission, Kansas. And I was there for a year, and I have many amazing colleagues that I met there who I think support me and have aided in my healing from compassion fatigue that I experienced, and encouraged me to open my own private practice, which really was my own dream that I had somewhere along the line that I never really intended to fulfill, but they encouraged me to do so. And that's really how I landed here. And I'm very thankful for the support I had along the way.
Wonderful. I think you've all worked in community mental health. Is that right? Yeah, so I think that we can agree that community mental health can be really demanding and rewarding. So I appreciate you speaking to that. And it also sounds like you all had many lives leading up to this point. And I agree with Jennifer. I think it's important to normalize that that even that in itself is education, and you're building experience and really valuable experience that can lend you to where you are today. And Jennifer was getting her master's degree in counseling when I was in high school studying AP psychology. And it was that time that I determined I also wanted to be a counselor. So I think the timing was just perfect, honestly. So everything kind of, works out the way that it does. So thank you all so much for sharing that. Okay, so the next question I have for you all is, this is a panel talking about women's mental health specifically. So I'm curious about how your identity as a woman does your identity as a woman impact your approach as a counselor? And if it does, how so?
For me, I think it would be more accurate to say like my identity as a Black woman impacts how I show up as a counselor. And I think it just makes me consider all the outside oppressive factors that people go through that affects mental health. And whether that's access to basic needs, experiencing microaggressions or oppression as a woman, as a person of color, as LGBTQ, like all those things, I just try to bring that into the counseling room with me, because I think sometimes we can, in individual counseling, we can put a lot of onus on the person for what's going on. Like, okay, well, you can just shift your mindset. And it's like, when you're living in a world experiencing certain things, I cannot just shift my mindset. Okay. So I think, I try to bring that kind of lens when I work with my clients.
I took notes about what I wanted to say. And so this question is, does your identity as a woman impact your approach as a counselor? How so? And I wrote, yes.
Absolutely.
It's kind of hard to know where to start. I will maybe just add, because of my age, the piece that there were about 500 kids in my graduating class from high school. Again, it's a rural community, pretty poor. And I think in my class, so there would have been, approximately 250 women. And I know that there's one woman who became an attorney and one woman who became a pharmacist. And other than that, I'm not, in that time, there are also other women that became scientists and, other great moms, etc. But, the expectations, the standards, the ladder, in 1976, it was pretty short. We were beyond becoming, your old choice as a secretary, a nurse, or a teacher. So I think we were beyond that in 1977. But because of the socioeconomic status level of where it was from, I don't know that we were really beyond that. So anyway, it's had a huge impact on absolutely everything I do and everything I've done, and continue, like today, even I'll feel a barrier. I'm thinking, why do I feel like I can't do that? Or what feels so hard about that to me? And, ultimately, because I'm a woman. Okay? So there have been so many things that weren't, but I didn't learn about a lot of things being accessible to me without it. So, anyway, I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Jennifer, does your identity as a woman impact your approach as a counselor? And if so, how so?
Oh, yeah. I'm with Renee. Just yes. Well, socially, we are kind of conditioned to understand roles. So I'm never going to enter the space of therapy and not consider how someone may perceive me. And so if I'm doing my job well enough, I will understand and normalize for them to see me in a particular way because of their experiences, but then also to challenge that and to see me as the individual that is complex, as appropriate for my role, not as just like an equal in the room. But I think that I have worked with many people who do come into the room with preconceived notions of me being a woman. And so therefore I'm just naturally going to understand and empathize with them, or have much more connection to my emotions or closeness to my emotions. And they're seeking that, and that's what they want. And because like I can perceive that's what they want, I think it makes it easier for me to connect with them. So I use it to my advantage. And I also recognize where it may be a disadvantage, but then I try to challenge it. Because I mean, we'd be kind of foolish not to recognize like stigmas and roles and stereotypes. And also we have to challenge them to be authentically ourselves.
Well, I really appreciate everybody talking about how other aspects of their identity intersect as the way that they approach clients. I think that there's this misconception that the counselor's going to be this blank slate, this neutral party, but we all come in also faced by those same challenges and stigmas of society as well. And so I can see that you all are intentionally, ethically weaving that into your practice. So thank you all for sharing. My next question for you is, in your clinical experience, what prevalent issues have you seen uniquely faced by women or female identifying people within the context of mental health?
Yes. So I feel like kind of going back to what's already been said about how women are raised and culture, the culture we grow up in, a lot of women struggle with assertive communication, people pleasing, and being able to set boundaries. And it's just basically trying to help women unlearn what we've been taught since we've been born, or who we're supposed to be. And I think that's a big challenge for a lot of my femme clients. Yeah.
So I love this question. I've spent most of my career in the field of sexual violence. So how is your career supporting women especially? Anyway, and sexual violence. I've worked with sexual violence across the continuum of care. So from children, males and females who have been victimized, in addition to victims of sexual violence of all ages, and then also actors of sexual violence, so adult perpetrators, youth with illegal sexual behaviors, and children with sexual behavior problems. I used to be able to say that really fast. But anyway, so across the continuum of sexual violence, and one of the things that I remember learning about one of the things I remember learning about adult women who acted out sexually is that they were either mentally retarded, that was the language we used back then, and or mentally ill, and I can't remember, there was like schizophrenic maybe or something, some like really big kind of a thing, and we now know, although women do not perpetrate at the same level that men do sexual violence, it's not just women who are extremely mentally ill and or women that have developmental disabilities. They're all kinds of women. So, and with that, talking about that, people may not feel like a lot of compassion, like, they might be women, but they're also, bad or whatever. But it's my belief that everyone deserves treatment, and treatment models for adults who've acted out sexually haven't really been developed, honestly. I mean, there are good models at this point for all of the populations that I mentioned before for treatment, but the women who act out sexually aren't necessarily great models. And then I'll go back. Individuals, same thing with victims of sexual violence in 2010 was really, and that's a little bit of a rough guess, but that was about the time when they first came out. And again, this is being the victim of sexual violence is a uniquely female experience. Random men have experienced sexual violence as well, but again, disproportionately, it's women that have been sexually assaulted. And so it was just like 10 years ago that we had evidence-based models to treat children who had experienced sexual abuse or assault. So anyway, I think I believe had it been a uniquely male problem, that those models, effective models of treatment, would have been developed way before the war. So I can talk for a really long time about this, but I'll stop. All right.
Thank you for that unique perspective.
Sure,
on,
yeah.
Jennifer, in your clinical experience, what prevalent issues have you seen uniquely faced by women within the context of mental health?
I guess I want to answer this from two perspectives. One is as the clinician and having worked in social services, and from this side of the conversation in therapy, that I've seen a disproportionate amount of males in social work be elevated to positions of authority. And I think that is really disheartening. I've worked alongside males who will identify and understand and recognize that they're offered more opportunities. And so I think something uniquely faced by women is to demonstrate leadership skills and to be acknowledged for them, not just having them, but to get acknowledged. We have to work a little harder for that, where it's naturally presumed of males, unfortunately. And so some of the work that we do is to try to normalize that. And I've seen progress in it for sure in the amount of time that I've been in the field. And then the other side of the perspective that I kind of want to answer is that, like, I do couples work too, and non-traditional conforming couples and lots of different relationship stuff. And so something that I see that's uniquely for cisgendered females and then women identifying as female, that there is a hesitancy to be, quote, too much. And just ownership of feelings feels threatening because there's so much language towards being emotional and demonstrating that, because we're as a culture sort of told that it is not acceptable. And I think that I hope I'm saying it, Michaela, correctly. Michaela noted that the people pleasing stuff, and I think that maybe a byproduct of like the cultural support for women identifying feelings and sharing those. So I see a lot of, I do a lot of encouraging women to feel empowered, to feel a feeling and to say it. Whereas once I noticed that cisgendered men or people identifying as men, once they recognize their feeling, they just own it. And it's something that I teach a lot of, like, just, you're allowed to have this feeling and you don't have to explain that to a soul. Like, it's yours, have it. And so, yeah, I also just want to say that, when a lot of advertisements or advertising agencies disclosed that women were specifically targeted completely disproportionately to advertisements, that I think that we saw a huge spike in women reporting shame, body shame, issues around not feeling acceptable. And I think that needs to be spoken to. It's uniquely female when it's being targeted, when we're targeted for these things, and it's just, we're inundated with it. We have to fight so much harder against it. I hope that came across well.
Yeah, no, it absolutely. You can tell who the counselors are in the room doing their they're attending. So yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah, you also spoke to a myriad of issues that women face: relationship concerns, sexual violence, assertive communication and boundaries, body image as well. And it sounds like empowerment is a huge issue within women and female identifying people. And I also really appreciate the perspective of women that perpetrate that violence as well, and kind of needing to kind of empower counseling to improve our treatment for those individuals too. So very, very wonderful insights from you all. Thank you. Okay, so my next question for you all is, how do you address multiculturalism in your practice?
So I feel like to really, address multiculturalism, it has to start with you first. First, I got to take care of me and do my own kind of work. And for me, that looked like getting older and realizing, like, okay, like the history I'm taught is like real iffy. So I needed to go back and read, especially more about Black people. I wanted to know more about Black people. So I did a lot of reading on that. And now, like, currently, I still do a lot of reading, but I try to think about, okay, like, what group that I not really know about? okay, is it Native Indigenous people? Let me find a book like Braiding Sweetgrass, which is highly recommend, to read that. And let me put myself in spaces where things are going on that are different than me. So then when I come into the counseling space, I think it makes it easier for me to be curious about people rather than presumptuous, because it's not like you can have all this information and it just applies to the person that fits that category perfectly. No, you got to learn all your clients. So I think it helps me be open and curious. And lastly, I just want to say I like to talk about, I try to be intentional about giving space to my clients to talk about the difficult things like race, politics, because sometimes people are kind of edging around it, and I know it's uncomfortable because in our everyday society it's uncomfortable. So I try to be very intentional about creating that space so that we can have these multicultural conversations when appropriate.
So for me, I think my efforts in really embracing multiculturalism started about 10 years ago when my first daughter-in-law became pregnant. And I noticed that I had some racist beliefs or experiences or that kind of thing. And I noticed that, and I had been naming it to family and friends and colleagues. And I really just wanted to honor my grandkids. So it's like, that's gross and ugly. And I don't want to bring my grandchildren into a world where their grandmother, they would know me as that way. And I don't know that they would. It wasn't like real overt. It was just, some covert stuff that I had awareness of. So anyway, I began to read a lot and learn a lot, or not a lot. There's so much to learn. But anyway, just really opening up, I think, my heart and my mind to new experiences and new ideas and new thoughts. And currently, my private practice, Barclay Counseling Services, is based in anti-racist principles. And like tomorrow morning, I work together with a good friend and colleague, Abhishek, and he and I have kind of agreed to partner in certain ways in doing this. And the practice is set up in a real, what I consider kind of an anti-racist way, and that everything is transparent. Therapists are paid a much better percentage than what is generally available out there. And then part of the model is that if you would like to work with us at Private Counseling Services, then we are going to support you in realizing your dream and whatever that is for your career. And right now, I won't name the name, but we've got some like really big success in that area. One of our friends that we work with is really realizing her dream, which is really fun. And her dream includes a number of things, but also to develop in her own practice. So, working to support her in every way that we can to make it happen. So, just one other quick thing. We're probably going to have to write it down. Tema Open, it was really encouraging her into the work that we're doing. Like we have a meeting tomorrow morning, and there are a team of names principles of white supremacy. And so I'll just write one real big on the board, and then tomorrow in our meeting we're talking about cases, and just talking about stuff that procedures or boring things. But we'll have that in mind and everything we do. And I'll just name a really quick thing, like when clients call, one of the principles of white supremacy is urgency and perfectionism. So we have to call them back immediately. And so we really kind of evaluated that, what are our expectations around that? And I think we've sort of landed on and do believe it's important to respond to clients pretty quickly because our clients reach out to us at a time when they're in need and they're training and they're ready to talk about things. So it's based on that practice is based on the client's need as opposed to that kind of white supremacist idea of urgency. So anyway, that's just an example of how we're creating it. But it's really just been great. I'm so glad I'm ending my career on this note. It's so great. So, but yeah, Jennifer.
Okay.
Wonderful. She's at it.
So I would say that I first of all want to address that as a young person, I was exposed to a multicultural household through like my father's relationship. And I'm infinitely thankful for that because in growing, like as I grew and I learned, I saw things from perspective because I saw like sidelining with, let's call them step brothers, and so like I could see what they experienced and they would talk to me about it. And I was exposed very early on to like the privilege which was afforded to me because of my appearance. And so I think from that point on, I was far more receptive to understanding change and difference, and what factors influence other people and to think about factors that influence other people and not singularly just myself. And so I think that has always made me very curious about the experiences of other people. And so I intentionally put myself in situations where I'm often the minority or I need to learn about other people. And I think it just consistently expands me. And then when I work with other people, what I do is hold the knowledge of what some people that might identify in their ways of identifying might act and seem and do and be, but I hold that almost here. And then I try to understand the individual so that I'm never making assumptions. I always invite them to teach me about who they are, but I also am aware of what exists. And so I love that dance. It is so intriguing to see a person be different a little bit from our assumptions. And that's just such an enjoyable thing. The way I specifically like embrace this in my practice is that because I understand that there are many cultures which were not afforded opportunities like mine was. As when I say that, I mean like white culture. So in my pay structure, I include a tier system so that there's a restructuring of access to expert care. And so that like anybody who is potentially held back in any way, and that doesn't quite matter why, but if they want access to care, they're able to choose a tier of payment that works for them. And then I also offer a sliding scale. And the goal for me with that is just to acknowledge what injustice is done to other people and to try to rectify that within my power. And yeah, that's what I'm just trying to do. Oh, and then also like I try to be approachable. So like if you imagine being from the LGBTQIA plus community and you look at my website, like please don't look at it right now because it's under construction and I don't want you to drag me for this. Like it's like there should be something on there that says, hey, yes, you specifically, you come over here. And and it should be I want it to be inviting. And that's also how I approach it. Like all skin tones, all sexes, all sexualities. And I just want people to immediately know that about me. So those are the ways I do it.
Thank you all for sharing not only your own personal ways of adopting multiculturalism, but giving examples how you apply that into your practice. Renee, I remember learning from you in assessments. You were the first professor that I'd ever heard use the term anti-racist practice. And that really got me excited and interested. And you gave us so many examples of how to eliminate that power differential that exists between the counselor and the client. Because you walk into a room with a counselor and there's this presumption of authority and of power. And for a minority group, that can be further stigmatizing and prevent them from being open and honest about their concerns. So I commend you for taking a stand on making sure that you apply that into your practice. And also just for everyone, I think I've heard a lot of self-awareness and a lot of reflection of the self. I think that's really important when you're adopting multiculturalism. And humility about what you may not know. And, your perspective isn't the only perspective. And that's kind of an uncomfortable reality to face. And the last thing I heard was exposure. So really just putting yourself in spaces where other people that may not look or act or think like you exist, because you might learn something new. It might challenge your perspective a little bit, and it can really help you to, approach your clients with that. So, thank you all for sharing the ways that you include everybody in mental health. Extremely important. Okay. My next question for you all is, what should women and non-binary individual people look for when seeking mental health care?
I think women and non-binary people, when seeking out mental health, I mean, I think Jennifer was saying is important, like feeling welcome to the space. Even before we get into our individual session, do I feel welcome in this space? And I think you should seek people who are not afraid to talk about differences. Because if we're gonna tiptoe around our maybe differences, maybe not, but even if we do seem alike, I'm sure there's going to be differences. We can talk about that too. But I know, like, you just hear different things in the counseling world when you're working in different places under different people. But people have a lot of different ideas about how much of yourself or you should bring into the counseling room, or what type of questions you should ask and that type of thing. But I think ignoring people's identities in counseling could cause harm at worst and could not be helpful, you know. So I think you should seek people who hold space for you to be your whole self, to bring that.
Yeah, I think looking for providers who lead with curiosity, and who are able and willing to have honest conversations with you about things. I recently have a client who had decided it was best for them to begin to practice polyamory. And again, I'm old, but I was like, I don't know. And so I had questions and concerns. And so I just named that with them. I was like, okay, so I'm happy to be here with you and walk with you on this journey. And I have to name some of my concerns about this. And anyway, and so currently I think the client is doing really well, and and I'm doing really well. So I think just a provider provider who's willing to lead with curiosity and interest about what's going on.
So the way that I would answer this is very similar. Just looking for signs of acceptance up front, but like also like just know, like, you run the show. Like, it's about you. It's not about your therapist. So when you go in, you just say, tell me what you know about being non-binary. Tell me about what you understand about women's mental health. Like, what's your experience, your cultural relevance to this, or how have you educated yourself? However you might want to ask the question within your own comfort. Like, I would really encourage anyone entering therapy to do that, because the result you're really looking for is to understand if you like this person. That's real important, because I've sat with therapists with the intention of personal work, and I've just been like, this is just, I don't think I can even say the F word right now. Like, I feel so uncomfortable. And that's a big one for me. So like, you run the show, like, feel yourself in your own comfort with someone, and then ask questions, because it's your journey and you should do it the way you want to do it.
It sounds like you all agree that individualizing your clients is extremely important. Marketing yourself as somebody that is welcoming to all communities is extremely important, or even specific communities that may not have that front-facing marketing as often. Something that Michaela taught me during our experience in supervision, when I was nervous about like imparting values onto clients, Michaela said, I don't think I want a counselor that wouldn't call out the oppression that I face as a woman, or as a Black woman, or as a disabled person. And that really empowered me to allow myself to integrate that awareness into my counseling. So really seeing how these ideas can really be applied, in front of a client. Excuse me. So thank you all so much. Okay, so the next question I have for you all is, considering college students, what is the best personal and professional advice you have ever received?
I think some of the best personal advice I've received, and it's gonna sound kind of like a Debbie Downer, but I promise, like, it has value. But like, nobody's coming to save you is something my mom tells me, and not that you won't have a support system and nobody cares about you, but like nobody is coming to rescue you. So it's like when you're going through things, you have to be your own advocate. You have to take care of yourself. And I feel like counseling is one of those fields where the personal and professional kind of intersect in a way that's different in other fields. So it's just like, if I'm personally not okay, I'm not going to be professionally okay because I'm the instrument of my work. So just advocating for yourself. Once again, you get a lot of feedback in academia, in workspaces. So you fortifying yourself in who you want to be and how you want to show up as a counselor or whatever field you're in. And because people are going to have ideas and you're going to have to decide, am I going to take them or am I going to stand 10 toes down on what feels good for me? So yeah, that's my personal / professional.
So I gave this question a lot of thought, and I really couldn't think of any great advice I ever gotten. So I don't know what that says about the community that's grown up in. But one thing that I did learn a lot about is the value of generosity. And it's one of my very favorite stories, and I might get a little tearful because I just love this story a lot. So my grandmother, who I never met, she's my favorite grandma, by the way. She passed away about a year before I was born. And here's a story about her life. So she was born on an Indian reservation in Oklahoma. She had my mom when she was 16. She was a very good Southern Baptist. And, they have a generosity, or they have a culture of generosity and caring for their community. And, so on Christmas Eve one night, my grandmother, who would have been, I was doing the math, I don't know, maybe like 28 or something, when she sat down with her 4 children and, were older, and said, okay, here's what I got everybody for Christmas. And so everybody needs to pick one or more of your gifts that you want to give to this family, because my grandmother and her friend had taken in this family that didn't have any place to live. The children, again, this is just the story, who knows, but the children had lice, they cleaned them up, it got them some clothes to wear, etc. And so anyway, and my mother and her siblings tell that story. This is the best Christmas they ever got. And I love that. And I feel like I've learned about generosity. Maybe your advice was be generous.
Yeah. This is a safe space to be Did everybody else repeat the question for you?
Okay. No. I just was making sure that I knew it was my turn.
Yeah.
The best personal advice I've ever been given, and I know this sounds so crazy to say in this forum, but like, I had a good friend look at me and be like, you ain't shit. And I just thought, that's rude. Like, but then I realized, like, yeah, I'm just not. Like, I'm just humaning literally like everybody else and trying to figure things out. And I think my ego was a little out of tune for a minute because I was just pissed off he would say that to me. But it really got me like thinking, like, oh yeah, I think I was like inflating my importance as a therapist a little bit, and for someone to just say, what are you doing? In just such a blunt way, say it to me. I just remember that, like, I'm not saving anybody. I'm just offering opportunities to be seen and to be heard, and then like giving feedback about what maybe could help them expand their understanding of themselves. And I'm not saving anyone. And so having a wild ego is just wounding me and them. So I think that always helped me keep myself in check about what I'm really doing. And then like, my professional advice that was given to me was that you can do no good. You can do no good from a place of not feeling well. And that gave me permission to really embrace like the compassion fatigue that I had experienced. And I just did not want to admit that I was suffering in any way. I really wanted to just keep going because there were so many teenagers suffering and I wanted to be there for them. And someone just said, you can do no good from this position. And I think I heard that and I was like, oh, you're right. So I needed to hear that. I needed to get checked because I don't want to do the wrong things with people. And I also needed someone to tell me it was okay to take care of myself. I just hadn't realized I wasn't. And so that really changed things for me.
Yeah, that first piece of advice you shared, I shared everyone's story on social media, and something I learned about Jennifer was she has a witty approach, and so I think that comes here, something I love about her so much. And then, yeah, also speaking to the professional advice about taking care of yourself, I think there's an expectation of counselors to be the ideal human, to be the mentally stable one, whatever that means. And so we try to advise clients to take care of themselves, prevent burnout, drink water, get sleep, and all those things are some of the things that counselors can forget about themselves. So it's important that others can be there to remind us. Even doctors get sick, So I think that was really important advice to share. And, yeah, I kind of wanted to just kind of build off of that. I think burnout and self-care and compassion fatigue are issues that are kind of more than just in the counseling field. So can you all talk about how you engage in self-care and how you prevent burnout in the healthcare profession?
As a PhD student, this is like so fast that
He's ready.
Because as you're saying that, I'm thinking about how demanding PhD programs are, and in a program like counseling, I'm expected to counsel people. And some feedback I have given before was like, you're sending students to go counsel burnt out. Like, so what does that mean for us if we are counseling burnt out? And so I guess my first thing is like calling it into the room and being realistic about it, because I think in academia specifically, there is all this feedback about like, yeah, take care of yourself, find the time. But it's just like, y'all, it's the school, it's the system. Y'all fuck up all the time. This is the reason my mental health is really like so sometimes it feels like a lofty dream we like to talk about, like, but I do my best. So what I do when I can is sometimes I kind of, especially if it's been a lot of hard sessions, I kind of check out for a little bit. And I don't recommend checking out all the time for long periods, but sometimes you just gotta take a step back and do something that's common. For me, that's my Nintendo Switch. Right now it's Stay Hard. And spending time with family. They refill my cup. That was a big reason why I only applied to UMKC, because I realized this is going to be really hard. And if I'm going to do it, I need my people around me. So whether that is I'm bidding for support or we're going to happy hour to have fun, doing those things really help. And lastly, I would say alone time, saying no to things, because my free time is already limited. So sometimes there's this pressure, like, oh, I haven't seen this friend in forever, or, I'm not really showing up for things. But sometimes I have to choose me. I have to say no so I can take care of myself, so I can be ready for the next thing I have to do.
All right. I always tell people I think I've had a better life because I've been a counselor. There's been such a huge demand for me to take care of myself. So I garden. I spend a lot of time going horseback riding on Sunday morning with my grandkids. And I'm always have lots of friend groups that I spend time with. Friend groups, many of which are counselors, but many of which are not. Like my best girlfriends from my 5th grade Sunday school class, they're not counselors. Anyway, so just spending a lot of time with girlfriends and friends. That's just but so in reading anyway, I have a ton of hobbies and and again I've engaged in those hobbies more, I think, because I've done a lot of really hard work over the years. So also I'm actually doing a workshop in a couple months on self-care, and it's from an empiricist view, because I do think I was like, yes, yes, behind you. Because, it's really so many of the principles of white supremacy in our like agencies and schools, et cetera, those expectations for perfectionism, urgency, black and white, just all those kinds of things are really the culprits. I honestly, in my career, and I worked really hard and I've worked with really hard cases most of my career. I don't know that it was ever really the cases that were. It was generally the expectations of the agency, the politics, the silly ways to do timesheets this week, and then they have to do them differently the next week. And just all those little things that were more likely to burn out. And I'm going to say one other quick thing. I also think even just our classic responses to self-care, like take a bubble bath, drink more water, get enough sleep, etc. I think that's a very white supremacist approach to self-care. There's never an invitation from, for example, the agency to, maybe we can do some things differently that would make things easier for people. Let's live in this community together and be responsive to each other. Obviously, it's something I feel super passionate about. So again, I do think our approach, so whenever you hear those kinds of things, wherever you are, like here are some answers to self-care, question them. So, yeah.
I do want to say we have plenty of time, so if you want to continue to speak about what you're passionate about, we'd love to hear it. So just so you know,
Okay,
you have
thank
plenty
you.
of
Yeah.
time. So Jennifer, how do you address preventing burnout and self-care in the health profession?
Okay, so I have mentioned already experiencing burnout, but when I was younger, I owned a private healthcare where I just went and took care of elderly people, and I experienced compassion fatigue in that way too. And I didn't actually learn how to get out of it at that time. I just said, I'm done. So I never learned to fix it. It was in this field that with my colleagues that couldn't see me and they learned who I was, listening to their feedback helped me heal that. So it's really important to have people who that you can talk to, that can give you the feedback. It seems like this, and you can hear it like, you're right. I am a little more irritable than I usually am. And you're detecting things way earlier when you have that kind of support. And that could even just be one singular person. And I also can say that two major things I did in my personal life and that marry into my practice is I say no. I'm just like, nah, I can't do that. I'm not gonna do that. I don't like it. And I don't explain it. I just have to say that changed my life. Just feeling compelled to want to do so much. Like, if you're familiar with the Enneagram, I'm an 8. We do stuff. Like, we do stuff all the time, and we don't stop doing stuff, and we oftentimes think we're supposed to be in charge of stuff. So I just had to say, no, no. I can't do that. No. And when I did, I built more self-reliance and self-trust because I was genuinely taking care of myself instead of overextending. And so it really just emphasized more value within me to be able to say no. So, I'm at the point now where I say no, and I oftentimes don't experience guilt for that. I'm just like, no, because another piece of advice that someone said to me is, if it's right for you, it's right for everyone else because you're connected to all of us. And that was kind of mind blowing for me. So, and then the last thing I do for practice is I show up as myself. I just am not like your typical professional. I really like to show up and take my shoes off and maybe wear my socks. And, if I came from the gym 2 hours ago, I might have my gym clothes on. You're going to get the education I have and my humanism, and I'm going to hold you as a priority. But I'm going to look the way I need to look because I'm teaching you that authenticity can look any way it needs to. Like, that's the impact I hope to have if I'm allowed to have one. So I can't just like put on a business suit or wear slacks because I feel stupid in slacks. Like, it just doesn't, my body feels goofy. Like, I need to wear what I need to wear. And that has helped me so much. Just giving myself permission to be myself with my predilections and to be in the room, and that is actually safe and fine.
A lot of nods whenever you had said that you're kind of challenging that standard of having to dress some sort of professional way. That's something that we try to do here at the Women's Center, is really encourage people to express themselves if they want to, and not really confine ourselves to patriarchal standards of being formal. And things I heard about burnout, really staying true to yourself, social support, saying no and setting boundaries, which I know can be hard for a lot of people. And also really questioning the systems in place that made you burn out in the first place. I think there's this expectation that it's like, okay, do all these things to prevent burnout, but don't question why you were burnt out in the first place. So if you can kind of reverse engineer that, then you might be able to change some of the systems in place to prevent other people from being burnt out. And Jennifer talking about how she kind of shows up as herself. She, can wear gym clothes to session and just really be authentic. I think that leads me into the next question I have is, how do you guys envision the future of the mental health profession?
So I'm a dreamer. I don't like to think inside the box. I'm like, okay, it sounds impossible, but it's possible maybe.
Mhm.
But for me, like, I'm trying to envision like what therapy could look like for Black communities being in community with each other. Because individual therapy is mostly what we're taught about, and we do just some group stuff, and all that stuff is very beneficial and cool. But we know there are cultures that have these more communal backgrounds and foundations. So it's like, how can we reimagine what the right way to do therapy is to be more inclusive of other people's cultures? Do we need to go back and see what people were doing before formal psychology was developed? Because people had to be having mental health problems before we had formalized psychology, and they probably were doing something about it. So it's just like, how can we, going back to like questioning everything, that's part of it too, is like you get taught all these very standard things and they are necessary and helpful, but also questioning like, what else could we do? Could we change this? Could this benefit a client? It doesn't have to be any one thing. So for me, it looks like I want to have a community center that has different facets to it, including mental health services. Like, maybe you come in for a drumming circle and you end up talking to somebody and realizing you need mental health services, and you feel more apt to go because I feel comfortable in this space already and my community members are here. So I try to think about how to bring people together and working on our mental health, because, and I think about for Black people, our generational trauma, the things we've gone through together, how can we also get through together? So yeah.
You gotta let everybody know where your community center is whenever you establish it.
I feel the best line.
No pressure.
I love everything you just said. Awesome. Yeah, I'm really excited about the future of our profession. I think about where we came from and what I learned, and I loved it then for what it was then, and now I think there's so much more that's fantastic that's happening. So, two of the things that I'm most excited about, one is just what we know about our brains. I mean, I really, when I was working exclusively as a trauma therapist, I really thought of myself as like a brain scientist. That sounds a little bigger than it wasn't a ego thing. I understood the impact of trauma on a person's brain, and I understood what healing looked like in a person's brain, and it was so helpful. It also gave me a lot more confidence when I was working, as opposed to just like, okay, I'll listen to you. I mean, that has a lot of value and it has its place. But if I really know internally that by doing this or encouraging the client to engage in these behaviors, that actually will heal the brain where it was injured as a result of the trauma, that's exciting. I mean, that's just really fun. And yeah, let's stop there. But the other thing is, I'm hoping in the work that I'm doing, and that I think a number of other people are doing as private practitioners, is sort of putting pressure on the out. So let's say the inside circle is like the hospitals and not-for-profits that hire therapists, and I don't know who else would be in that inside circle. But I'm hoping that people like myself that are providing workplaces for individuals that are licensed that are like, yeah, you know what? Hey, you set your own schedule. Wear what you want to wear to work. Work when you want to work that works around your family life. And I think about myself as a single mother, like, oh my gosh, how much better would my life have been had I had that kind of freedom to work a schedule that worked well for me, as opposed to the schedule of the agency. So anyway, I think there are people around the institutions that have driven mental health for so long that are hopefully kind of breaking that system. Like, you can't continue working in this white supremacist patriarchal kind of way when your employees aren't going to work for you. And super quick, I love what COVID did to our communities around pay, rates of pay in work environments too. So I think, there are things that are cracking those old ways of working and our old belief systems. And oh my gosh, what a really fantastic workplaces, and then of course services to follow we'll be able to provide if we break some of those institutional ideas down.
I would say that my vision or dream for the field is, it's huge. I'm hoping people can be just, a lot more human and break away from this like one-to-one kind of sitting scenario. We used to think that doing anything online was going to ruin the therapeutic rapport. There wouldn't be gains. And then now we had to go virtual from COVID. And now everyone's like, oh, I want to do virtual. It means that I can access my therapist from anywhere. And then like some of us are like, how is that working? Well, because like we told ourselves it wouldn't work. And so we never tried it, And so I'm hoping that we can just continue to push the envelope. Like, I personally feel like that's my role. I push the envelope because first off, that feels good. And then like, I expect me to do it because the people who are a generation ahead of me pushed it enough to where I can stand where I'm at to push. So it's like, that's your role. You want it to continuously develop. And so I'm hoping that we continue to like marry some of the somatic experiences with like active experiencing and letting the the body holds the score. That book made a huge impact in our world. And I think that I'd love to see a lot more like body awareness, like holding trauma and working on like some of the body awareness, because, that's half the equation, thinking, feeling. So I'd love to see more of that, but also just sort of the stigma of what therapy is supposed to be doing. Like I've done a lot of study separately on like spirituality, religion, and philosophy. And I use all of that in any way possible to help a person to make a step forward or a gain. So like when I'm working with someone, if they want to literally bring tarot cards into the session and say, I'm such a queen of whatever. And I'll say, that's wonderful. Now tell me how, and so like we have so much ideas of what can't happen in therapy. And I think actually that's limiting us being useful. So when someone comes in and perhaps they have like opposing values to my own, which they don't know, like I can work with them because I've done the study to do that. It's not necessarily falling underneath psychology, but philosophy answers a lot of questions or asks so many good questions. And so sometimes having good questions helps people to expand their awareness. And so I would love to see, and I have friends who practice similarly, I'd just love to see so much more acceptance of other things which could come into the room that give people like a feeling of empowerment, that I could use anything literally to challenge myself, to gain awareness, and then to build and create the authentic life I want. Oh, I also think that we're going to go to kind of a universal licensing, because like for LPCs, we're doing this compact thing now where, you get licensed in like say Missouri, but there's 7 other states that are in a compact with them. So you can work with those clients as well. And I think we've long been needed that.
Totally agree. Absolutely. There are different requirements in different spaces. So if you move somewhere else, you might have to do extra education, and that can be cumbersome and prevent people from relocating or expanding their services elsewhere. But thank you all for sharing your vision for future of mental health care. It sounds like creativity is a really big piece of it, and really asking ourselves, why are we doing the things that we're doing it? Just because it's the way it's always been done? And if so, like, how can we question that? And also, if we can trace it back, what is the common denominator of who is making those decisions and who is setting those theories and those foundations? It really did break my brain to learn that some of the psychological theories that we hold as truth and foundational were stated by problematic people or backed by maybe not the most sound science. And so, but yet we hold on to those things as the way things are. And so not only are you guys imagining what it's like to progress the field of mental health, but you're like doing it. You know, you guys are already integrating that in the work that you do, and how exciting it is to be a student in mental health and kind of see where it gets to go. So yeah, that is all the questions I have. However, I do just want to say a few things and then open up for questions and discussion. So first of all, I just want to appreciate all of you for taking the time today to come and share your expertise and your experience, giving all of us some really good ideas about how we can integrate creativity and multiculturalism and authenticity into our work, whether that be in the helping profession or otherwise. I will say on the blue stands over here and over here, I do have little flyers with QR codes that link to both Jennifer and Renee's practices. Michaela's not currently seeing clients other than at Key Medical Center, but eventually we'll get her word out there too. There's also QR codes about UMKC counseling services and UMKC community counseling and assessment services. And then on the bottom, there's also a bunch of hotline information, like crisis line, text line, things of that nature. So those resources are available to you. And I will also remind you all that in the back corner, we have representatives from the counseling services here with some swag and some information about how you can access that care. And then again, over there, there's some information about CCAS, which is the other counseling center here at UMKC. Okay, does anybody have any questions or thoughts or anything that they want to share with our panelists?
Yeah. I made a list because I was like, but I just come back to me because I do. Let me just say this one thing that I think is so very powerful, and I was just in a session talking about this the other day and at the African American Read-In, and that is the rest as resistance, right? Chelsea and I have had a number of conversations about that, and also rest inequalities. And so I just want to point out how different the answers were from what you said, Michaela, right? As opposed to Renee and Jennifer, that the idea of like the permission to carve time out, and that as African American women, like we are women of past of enslavement, which tells us that rest directly impacts our worth and value, because obviously we're working for free and creating wealth for others. And so even the permission to ourselves to rest or to not be in full and complete doing all the time. And it was very interesting. I would even say for me that when I took on this position, the immediate response that I received, not only from my own Black women peers that were celebrating, but everyone that was like, oh, now it will. Now you'll be able to do, oh, I know you're going to be able to do this. And it was like, and I was like, initially it was like, oh, this is a compliment. And then I sat with that and I was like, this isn't a compliment. This is more of the same, which is we can have, and I'm saying this theoretically, 52 years of regularness, right? But then I come in and now it has to be above excellent. That I can't come in and be also regular. That I have to come in, that the goal is for me to make it above excellent and change things in 6 months that have been in place for 52 years. And just to sit with that and to resist that was very difficult, because there are, and the microaggressions came from everywhere as to like, oh, this hasn't been done, or you didn't learn this, to resist that, right? So I just thought that was really interesting. I wanted to say that. And then to the beautiful story about your grandmother, there's a song by Gregory Porter that's on his Christmas album that I would love for you to hear, where he talks about that exact thing, that on Christmas, his mother would make them give away their best outfit and like their favorite gift. And then she would break bread with them. And that as a child, he didn't understand that, but now he does that same. It's just a beautiful song. So as you got teared up, I had to think about that as well, and just the beauty of that. His name is Gregory Porter. Yeah, he would have been my husband, but I married someone just as talented. Right. Also, when I think about the future, right, and like you talked about being curious, but also what can counseling look like? There's no way I know for a lot of people that I know that could actually go and sit with a therapist. The privilege of that, to be able to pause in your day from 8 to 5 to go and see a therapist.
Yeah.
And so we ask ourselves these questions like, why aren't more people in therapy? It's like, have you ever tried to get a person who's, carrying trash to, excuse me, I have therapy, I can't run my route right now, right? So the Zoom aspect, because I knew that in COVID, I said, this is something that is going to elevate us as humans, because we are finally collectively having an experience. And that empathy we didn't have, right? For other people, we all experience this in our own unique way. And so my question is, like, when I theorize for the future, what would be great would be therapy from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. There are some of those of us who are night people. We are not day people. And pausing in the middle of the day and committing to go to therapy, right? For me, once a week at noon. I promise you, everything happens at that noon hour that wasn't ever happening before. But the fight that it takes to commit once a week to go to therapy is insane to think about. And this is me in some sort of place of privilege. So I imagine what that's like for people who don't have that. And when counselors they don't take people after 5 o'clock, well, I can sit in my car from 5 to 6, even as a single mom, and say, don't kill each other, I'll be in a second, right? I can sit in my car and do therapy and look at the camera and be like, don't hit your brother. Okay, I'm back, right? I mean, the realness of what it looks like for the people that need it the most is just something that is really powerful. And I agree about the future of really national licensing. I have an educational background, and I went from Mississippi to Missouri, and I was able to teach 6th through 12th in Mississippi, but then 9th through 12th in Missouri. And then it was like, well, we want you to go back and take 3 hours. Now, mind you, you're a teacher. You're already not making any money. But now, on top of a first-year teacher, they want you now to go back to school so that you can expand what you can teach when you've already done that. And so you've done the work. Lastly, the academy has got to figure out how we can stop being academically abusive to students.
Yes.
It is unacceptable, and the academy has hidden. They are just academic bullies. A lot of them are people who weren't popular in school, and they now have a place. And so I ask people all the time, is this really about assisting or becoming the oppressor? Do you want equity, or do you want to become the oppressor? Because that's the thing that we have to think about. Because a lot of our propaganda within this country is about becoming the one who now can oppress.
Right.
And so what we do in these academic settings, and as a person who's gone to graduate school, having unreasonable requests of students that make it, and then you were like, well, why are we, and I mean, I sit in these meetings, why is everybody dropping out? And I'm like, are we really sitting around asking this question? When you have 5 classes each asking for a 20-page paper, and then you take scholarship money from students who are getting financial aid? What? And we're asking this question. We have a food pantry, and we don't have proper transportation, and they're paying for parking, and then you want to know why students are stressed and why the counseling center is stressed? Like, I'm like, yo, this is not difficult. And so I just really appreciate all of the different perspectives that you all had. And Allison, you did a wonderful job of putting this panel together. and the questions that you ask, because to the young people here, like it's not up to the young people. We can continue to reimagine with the wisdom that we have of life. You know, your voice, we need your voice. We need women like you to say anti-racism and white supremacy. We need it from you. We know it's coming from her, but we need to hear it from you because it lands differently, right? Because you can change white people, right? We can change Black people, but you can change white people. And so I know you said you're nearing the end of your career, but I hope that you'll continue to do your advocacy voice because that is really needed. Oh, thank goodness. All right. Bring them in. Bring them in. We need you. We need you. So I just wanted to say that was so inspiring. So thank you.
You were so inspiring. I was coming for a different reason. I'm a professor in U.S. and Gender Studies class, and I am a Latina because a lot of people don't think I am because they see me, they see a white face. And my father, I'm half white, half Latina, but I'm actually more all Latina because I was raised by my mother and my mother's family. I never met my father. So I'm Latina. I just might not look like it.
But you're so good.
But thank you. And I feel like I've hit the most important time. And that was the reason why I came down here for another reason. But I appreciate you so much because I'm struggling with my students. And you answered a question that I had because I was poor going to school. Every kind of financial aid and scholarship possible at that time. And I know what it was like. I didn't have to worry because I was living in a dorm and I had my meals paid for. And I didn't graduate with a huge debt because I was so poor. My mother never made more than minimum wage. So, but I almost didn't go because my mom didn't know how to cook.
Sure.
And I had to get scholarships and what to do. Yeah. And our counselor, he was the football coach. So he didn't tell us. So I thought, right, I'm going to make it. I can't make it. Why was I even thinking I could? Well, I now figured out why I thought I could. But the point is that you said so eloquently was that we create systems that harm people. And we don't reflect. And I'll explain why they don't do this, because I've thought a long time. That's why I'm faculty senate chair-elect. You need to come and talk to our faculty and say that same thing. Okay? And to the administration. So I want you to come. I'm going to be the chair next year. So if we don't get you on this year, you're going to come. And I'm going to invite the chancellor and provost both to hear this at that time with the faculty and have some time to discuss this. Because we talk about recruitment and retention. Well, here's a classic explanation of why and why we need all this counseling support. I wouldn't be here without having lots of therapy, you know, and being free to tell my story. But the important thing is that we have to think of the students. And a lot of us have had a lot of privilege. And but a lot of us, as women, we often know the areas we don't have.
Yeah.
And so we all come out of our areas that we're most vulnerable, but actually it's our greatest strength. I was told that to get me into my master's program. And I had never thought of it, but it makes a huge difference. So your empathy is based on what you're vulnerable about, but that can also be your greatest strength. And I found out in my unicorn, the chances of my even graduating high school were less than 50%, let alone college. And here I am with a PhD. I get to sit in the room. And that's why I went for faculty chair, because I have to be there and tell them, but you said so eloquently, I'm going to take your voice. I want your voice in that room. It's me. And you want So absolutely. I'm struggling with students who aren't finishing it, and everything was going really well. And so I threw something at them to get them to feel like an asynchronous class online. And I do it not because I love teaching in person, but I kept asking my students, why don't you take my classes? It's race, ethnic, and gender studies. Everybody should be. Gen Z, come on, you guys know the diversity of the world and how important it is. So, well, Dr. Torres, we can't do that because night doesn't fit the schedule. So I did it at night. And before everybody was going online, I did, and I had a bunch of basketball players. God love them. They were so great. They loved the class. They told the other athletes, and pretty soon I'd have an evening class with a lot of athletes, and they all really loved my Latino studies. So it was great because we interacted. But the real challenge now is how do I really get students, and a lot of it's online asynchronous. I actually had the accident happening. I wanted to make students that are on my asynchronous class. You're not supposed to have 25, 30 minutes. Well, I chose to accept them because it was late semester. And I kind of felt like they really wanted this class. So I kept up with the idea of having a grade. And really, I had to do it. He grades, but I have to answer all the questions. But he really can't. I understand. What I'm trying to say is we have to bend over and try to think like the students and what are the problems. So I just spent some time talking to my surge student who's over to know. And I said, these are the problems I described. I said, but I think about half of the class is not going to finish the assignment because I threw a voice thread at me and they're not reading my instructions. And they're just saying, I'm confused. And so I spend a lot of time when I say, okay, I don't want them to fail. And I tell them, I'm on your side. I don't want, if you follow my instructions, you will not fail my class. You will do well in my class. And always ask them for help. You know, that gets them past the fear. So what I've done, I said to him, I says, okay, I don't want to have them feel like they fail. I'm going to say, finish it, hear the process, and finish it. And that will be your extra credit. And if you've already completed extra credit, because I had some students do that, you don't have to do the last week assignment. You can quit after the 7th week. And he said, you know, Dr. Torres, that sounds like a really good solution. So I'm asking, I don't want to penalize them. I was trying to respond to some of them wanting interaction, kind of like face-to-face. With this voice thread thing, all you had to do is create a slide, come up with a solution and quality in our school systems. Or outside the school systems, what would be creative ways to have a better educational system than we have right now? And what do you think? You can be as creative as you want. Look up and, I gave them a couple examples because someone said, well, you need that. I can actually give them solutions, but I don't want to. I can't use the federal government as a solution. Each state, school district, or county. I really want to. I don't want them to feel like they're So, what do you think? Is that? I know they're mad. They're a bunch of them. That's okay. But what do you think? I want to hear from the students. What do you think? Is that a good solution? What do you think?
I think anytime I hear the word extra that I can be able to perk up. So
I always give at least one extra credit assignment that would replace a major assignment that they have to do. Like they do something every week, whether it's a quiz. See, they gave them like quiz because it was multiple choice. And I understand. Everybody, not everybody. A lot of students, I give them 3 tries. Really, you can take it 3 times. And I have a big pool, so they don't give the same questions. What I found is that if you do that, they don't know the answers. And they say, well, why don't you release the answers? Then I can't give you 3 tries. What would you rather have? Oh, no, we'll take the 3 tries. I say, go back and study. I don't care if they study together. They're going to learn, right? So, I'm not here here to catch you. I'm here to help you. And then, you know, majority of them got 22 to 24 out of 24 points. They did do the work. So, and they don't have the same questions in test books. So they don't know all the questions. So if they did that well, I feel good. Anybody else? When you were, did that seem fair?
I'm a grad student, so I don't know if I can speak to an undergrad experience, but a professor where I asked for an extension on a paper, and he responded, "Thank you so much for communicating your needs to me. Like, take the time that you need." That encouraged me to never ask for an extension ever again, or like, not that if I needed it, of course I would ask it. I knew that he'd be open to it. But I think that made me want to work harder to ensure that I turned things in on time and did a good job on my assignment. So I think that compassion, that grace, we're not used to that. We're not used to that at all. So the minute a professor did that, I was like, whoa, you're thanking me for asking for what I needed? Like, I'm not used to that at all. So I think you adjusting it based off of their needs, I think is extremely
Okay, well, thank you. I think I try to do that. Student asks me, especially since you know, it's for evidence. I don't tell them that, but get off of it. Because these are hard times. Not everybody's back.
And I also think we have I was reading an article about like how school and university will feel very different for the next 7 to 10 years based on the students who are matriculated, you know, through middle, junior, high school and college within the pandemic. And I do believe that the most forward thinking places are often the most archaic because the university or post-secondary is a system. One of the other things that I think we rarely talk about in this country is that you know you have to go to school to become a kindergarten and a pre-K teacher, right? Do you know that? From toddlers all the way to 12th grade, you study pedagogy. If you're going to become a teacher, or you have to study, right? Whether it's elementary, middle, or high school. But then when students get to college, you just have people who are content specialists. So you've had schooling from people who have been taught how to teach. And then you come to college and they are just really smart, but they don't know how to teach. And we do not discuss that. And so faculty often believe because they know the information that they know how to teach, and they do not. It is my middle through high school educational background that has made me a great adjunct faculty. It has not been the content knowledge. It is understanding that people have multi-learning abilities, and when you give an assignment that you try to assign based on the multiple ways, learning what neurodivergency is, understanding like students may need breaks, and to be able to say, opening the class with, if you fail my class, it's because you chose it. It's not because it's designed to fail. This class is designed to pass. Think about if we all heard that, right?
Yeah.
If we all heard from the beginning of our lives, you are designed for love. You are perfect for love as you are, no matter what. And you hear that over and over. So as a student, we nurture students in a mostly female K-12 environment, and then we throw them into this hostile patriarchy. And we say, figure it out. You made it to college. You're grown. You're not grown at 18. None of us were. Right? And so now that we are talking about, and I tell people all the time, young people have more information coming at them than we ever did. The amount of information that you have to sift through. So you have a lot of information, but you don't have a lot of wisdom. Because there's no time to even sit and interact with someone who could be wise enough to help you through it, right? I spent my summers knitting and picking peas with my grandmother and washing grains. Do you know how much wisdom you get during that? But we go. And that's the system that young people were born into. That's not the one they created. And then we bring them to these universities and we say, figure it out. We're not going to have adequate housing for you. Figure out where to live in an exploitive city. Figure it out, right? Figure out how to be safe walking through a city where you move to. And we present one way before parents drop them off. And then it's like, it's really a very abusive relationship. And I mean, and we have to think about the deconstruction of that.
I'm really enjoying listening to you two ladies in the audience discussing. Excuse me, let me correct myself. You individuals in the audience. I'm really loving what you're saying, and I also am thinking about this book I read, American Detox by Carrie Kelly. It's about the myth of wellness and how gatekeeping wellness is, and it's very similar to the academic gatekeeping process in that, like, you really have to have a decent amount of money to go and do yoga, to go on little retreats. You know, otherwise you're YouTubing it and you're in like this little extra closet in your house and you're really trying to, relax. Just like, and oftentimes that's so unrealistic for many populations that experience socioeconomic distress, and because of the lineage of disadvantage. And so there's a wellness factor that happens because people just are gate kept, to be honest with you, intellectually. And so this even factors into insurance, because insurance then can approve of your diagnosis or not, and then decide how many sessions that you're allowed to have. And these are just some really old, antiquated systems which really limit our ability to provide support and education to the communities which we would want to. That we need to say, like, okay, this has been just completely gate kept. And so how do we open that up? And like that's where this book kind of changed my awareness on it. It's like, you're right. All of the people I go to yoga with are mostly white folks. And so, like, why is that? Let's look at that. What's happening? And I'm reading this book and she dives so much into it because like, she's a white woman and her best friend, the writer's best friend, is an African-American social worker. And so they together start diving into this and talking about some of these problematic ways. And so that's really where I personally said, okay, well, the thing I can do then is open up access. And I reached out to many of my colleagues that would identify in communities that have had disadvantaged lineages. And so made sure that was going to come across right, coming from, me. So I think that the academic system is also very gatekept, because if you can't apply for scholarships, or you're not able to get them, or you're only able to go so far with that, then I think it keeps a cap on something.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm really
Even
just offering support for your point.
Even the application process for grad school, for PhD programs, like I told you, I applied 3 different times now. Okay, the last time I only did 1 application, but the second time I did about 10. I had to ask for money. I know I spent well over $1,000 just to go to the interview in Chicago and Nepal. I'm spending almost $1,000, and I'm in getting my master's in. Like you said, like, if I don't have access to that, then I just don't go. I don't get considered, and that's just it.
Well, here you are here, so we know you're capable.
Mm-hmm.
But what are the barriers in order to get there? Right?
Right. Well, and can I just add too? One of the things I didn't think of when I was here was just to admit what you just told me.
Yeah.
And just say, could I do this? I really want to do this, but I just don't have the financial resources to do this. And this is my goal, and I don't want to put off and have to go work and then possibly lose my eligibility to go to the next level. I got to start paying on my. Okay, so could you do that?
I feel like at the time I applied to the Paul in 2017-ish, I would not have thought that I could do that, because I would I know how competitive it is. These programs are taking 5 or 6 people. I don't feel like I have the luxury to ask for anything. I need to show up, put the smile on, and hope they'll take me. And now, post COVID, kind of like we've been discussing before, I think I could probably ask, and I probably would try to ask. But back then, I was just so like, okay, we got to get to where we're going. I'm not thinking about anybody accommodating me. And my experience in master's program was not that anybody was going to accommodate.
Exactly.
I was gonna say it's the hazing, right? Because you're so traumatized by the experiences, which is whatever you're going on, leave it out the door, come here and perform.
Yep.
And as a Black woman, perform double to get half the credit. And so, like we just started talking about first gen. I worked at this university from 2000 to 2012 as the director of Upward Bound. It was hostile to first generation students of color. When I returned, I'm like, they have first gen roof? I'm like, we fought for this. And it finally came, but I was mind blown. I was like, all right, yay. And I'm sitting there saying, if you're first gen, please put it on your, proud first gen roof. And I'm thinking, really? This is amazing. They wanted us to put these little stickers up that said safe space. And it was for LGBTQ in our office. And it was like a big controversy if you put it up or if you signed and said, I am an ally. People were like, I know you're not going to sign that. I was like, I absolutely am going to sign this. So we've made a lot of big things, but it's only been recently to even be able to say mental health, to even be able to say that. To say I am struggling at work, I'm having a hard time, having a rough day, like that was not allowed, especially in the classroom. So I do think, and there is to hear you all as practitioners of this, and to see how willing and accepting you all to get there is very difficult. They make it so hard to schedule an appointment with a therapist because therapists are overworked. They don't have time. There's not even a system in place. Therapists are trying to answer emails between sessions. Okay. Well, okay, can you come in on this time? I know so many therapists that are like, oh, you're not at 12 today, you're at 1. Oh, my bad. Okay, well, if I can get you in. And I was like, this is not healthy for you. You know what I mean? Like, and so it's like, why are we asking? We don't ask doctor to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because therapists are mostly women. So we are always expected to take on the multitude of work in order. So you're supposed to buy the groceries, cook the groceries, clean the kitchen. Like, why is that? You see what I'm saying? But then when you get to the masculine level, then it's like, you need a secretary. Why are therapists answering calls from clients in between sessions? The crap that people dump on therapists, you need that time between just to be like, whoo, okay, that was a lot. Or let me go to the restroom because I've been trying to stay hydrated. So it is always like this conversation. And I don't know. So that's what I imagine, right? I imagine for the future what a lot of other countries do, which is, it is okay to pay somebody a fair wage to assist you. It is okay because you're actually a better person. It is okay to have a practice that starts at 11 instead of at 8. It is okay to do that. It's okay to practice until 8 because you want your mornings, because you want your time with your family to put your babies to bed or to do nothing. Even if you don't have any kids, whatever you want to do, walk your dog, whatever. Play with your 2 husbands, I don't care. Like, you want that time. So it's just, that is what I imagine, like a world that works for all. And when Jennifer talked about the spiritual component of that spiritual idea of how do you bring that in to practice, we actually practice therapy in this country, asking people to shield the very thing that is supposed to coexist with therapy, which is spirituality. Whether you have it or you don't, it's a part of yourself. So whether you're engaged in something official or unofficial, it's still a big part of your mental health. And so I love that you all touched on that as well, because that is something that's also really important.
Mm-hmm. May I say something before this ends? I'm deeply grateful to have been invited to this conversation, and it certainly benefited me to be amongst like minds. And so I just wanted to share that I was grateful for the opportunity, and that it's given me so much encouragement to continue to do some things I've chosen to do, and also it's expanding me to continue to do more. But I have a client in 10 minutes, and so I probably need to wrap up for myself. But thank you so much for having me.
Can she see us?
Yep,
Yeah.
yeah.
Can she see? Come on.
Yeah.
I didn't realize the one with the-
Bye-bye. Such a pleasure to meet and hear you. How do I get out of this? Okay, here we go. Bye-bye.
Figure the rest out.
Cool. Yeah, I appreciate you speaking about like the time needed in between sessions. I think especially as a student, you're really afraid to be like, wow, I was really impacted by that traumatic experience I just heard for the very first time, but you don't want your supervisor or your peers to think that you can't handle it. And so all of a sudden you think your own emotions are a weakness, even though others, you know, the client that you're seeing, you don't view it that way. But in yourself, it's really hard not to view it that way. And you immediately start learning how to stow it away, which is extremely not helpful, as we all know. So,
It is built into the system, right? Like, how do you, and when we internalize the oppression, that's the hardest part. Like, when you're like, whoa, I'm participating in this oppression of another person. The way that you just explain that, the very thing tell people is safe to do, we're not practicing that. How would you not be impacted by some of the things that you're hearing? Not even the 25th time. Like, especially if we're asking you to continue to have empathy for a 35-year career, you do feel that. And so I'm just so glad that you shared that. Like, what do you all think? Like, to that? How?
Yeah, I think about this a lot because, you know, as a student, you don't get the full-time experience because you're doing all this other stuff. And the more I do practicum, the more I think of was telling Renee, I was like, yeah, when I get done, I want to have part-time counselor and part-time father because I just don't know that, like you said, can I do 35 years of this like this? Well, I don't know. For me to be the best that I can be, I probably just need to do it part-time. But, you know, capitalism, so we'll see how that shakes out. But that's the goal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Say something. I think earlier at some point I thought, well, I probably should have told this story. Like probably 1998, we got raises, and I realized that because when I got into the field, actually it was more men in mental health than it was women, and then it's slowly switched. And by the way, when I got into the field, mental health providers, psychologists, etc., actually made a fair amount of money. I mean, they were, you know, usually, I mean, definitely middle class, if not, yeah. And then as more women got into the field, it became lower and lower paid. And I do remember, again, it was like 1998, I think, and I went to the CEO of the agency I worked at the time. And I was like, you know, so these guys that I'm working with, this is my team who I love, and they love me, and we work together collaboratively. They are all making more money than I am. Like, that's not okay. And she was a really cool CEO, and she was like, yeah, that's not okay. And so then she rectified it. But you know, I think again, it's just that being a female in any profession, and I feel really strongly about that. My thoughts aren't together, which is why I wrote things down. I don't bring my thoughts together that well. But you know, people are pushing for educators, teachers to make more money, which they should.
Yes.
Thankfully. And I would say that therapists are probably the lowest paid profession of any other profession. And we certainly, you know, we work till we're old because we don't have retirement plans. I mean, so I think, you know, there's a lot of continued oppression of women. I think that's institutionalized by the way that therapists are both treated by agencies and paid. We'll stop there. And our hourly fee, I mean, what we can get, you know, from the insurance companies we don't have time. You have to see, and thankfully I'm old enough, I don't have to work that hard anymore. But you kind of had to see people back to back in order just to pay your rent. So,
Yeah.
No,
yeah, yeah.
And I mean, you're teaching me you have to advocate for yourself.
Yeah,
That's the more,
absolutely.
that's what you all are teaching me right
Yeah.
now is that you got to fight that, like internalize the person that says, don't go to your boss and ask for more money. Like, you don't want to like create a stir. You don't want to sound like you're ungrateful. So,
And we get those messages as women, right? And even in this space that is to nurture that, we get to talk about those things over and over. I mean, even like, oh look, it's 2024. Why do we need a women's center? Like, that is
this is why.
this is why, right? It's like, and it's like that question is why. That very question, and so what do you all do? Sit around and just like talk and hate on men all day? And I was like, see, there's another example, right? That even when women gather, it means that we're talking about men, right? Just that idea alone, and that somehow we're talking negatively, right, about men, solely, right? So it's just so even like those types of ideas and things that we have in our head about advocacy. My mother said something to me recently. She left her spiritual community after 25 years, and if you all know anything about African American women and where they go to church, it is a really, really big part of their lives. And she also held a really high position in the church. So she needed to leave, according to me, 20 years ago. But she left after 25 years. And I said, Mommy, I'm so proud of you. And she said, I'm 70 and I'm reinventing my life. And then I said, but you're doing it. And she says, yes, because sometimes the mother has to mother herself. And I was like, you know what I mean? Like, she was like, I'm struggling. And I'm like, I got you. I'm here. What do we even know about elder women? What do we even know about what it means to age and to continue to grow and reinvent all of these things within mental health? And I said, Mommy, you should go to counseling. Like, this is a huge thing. And she says, well, counseling is for crazy people. But that's that generation, right?
Yeah.
That's something white women do. White women go to counseling. My mother was like, you go to therapist? You go to a white man? I was like, no, it's a black woman. She's like, oh, okay. I was like, well, at least you're not that crazy that you have to go to a white man to get help. That was really, that was like, yeah, you've hit rock bottom as a black woman if you got seek counsel from a white man, which is really funny, right? But those are the real conversations within communities and women of color. It's like, girl, you rock bottom and you got to go there. We've been counseling them in this country for the entire existence of this country. Why are you going to them? So in that, right, just the permission. And so you said, are you in the right field? And I will tell you this, Allison, just watching you here in the short time that I've known you, we definitely need you. We definitely need you and the type of you that you are and all that you bring. You are so intentional. You are so mindful, and you are an amazing listener. And so, and a great interviewer as well. You definitely took the right field.
I'm getting to be in that elder. And I can leave anytime I want. I'm retired, but I don't want to because I love my students and I think of my life now. It's hard.
Yeah.
And but I was thinking about how did I make it through all the things that I went through. I have a long story about UMKC. So the fact that I'm here, I'm going to be full professor, I'm pretty sure. And that's very rare among Latinas across the country to be full professors. Just so you know. And I survived and began to thrive because of therapists or white. Well, but my first one was Chinese American who understood being otherwise. And very gifted and talented. Another woman is very spiritual. And then when I was getting my doctorate, a therapist who was Puerto Rican, well, my Chinese American She's a noted scholar as well. And the one that I have now, I was helpful. And I've been with her for like 25 years. I wouldn't be thriving if it wasn't for that. But also the wisdom of my African American colleagues and friends who could hear the trauma and pain and not discount it. And so my advice to you, if you're all going through this, is to listen and seek out the wise women who walked similar paths, because they will help you to identify that and not be afraid to ask for help from counselors. There's nothing wrong. Dispel those myths. My family, I've had family trying to tell me, well, you've gone for so long, you know? And I said, actually, I don't want to end it right now. No, really. You know, I've learned and I'm learning about leadership and how we do it and just the practical things. And that's why I came into this room, because of your powerful testimony. And we need to share our stories. That's what will make the difference for others. They aren't alone. They're not alone. It's very difficult. And I don't know. There are others that.
Glad you got it.
Yeah.
I think one of your respectful of our speakers kind of is 4 o'clock. At this commence our feminist fireside chat. Thank you all so much for being here.
And I do want to say just out loud, thank you so much. I've told several people, Kendall did such an incredible job of emailing and keeping us posted and letting us know about parking, just all those things. It was just wonderful. So thank you. What a nice 2 hours.
Yeah, this is awesome. These are one of my favorite events we always have. So we always just have such meaningful conversations. I feel like I always leave so much wisdom. Thank you all for taking the time to share your experience.
Well,
I'm going to mention the video. A bunch of stress